Today I'm going to explain how to play every evolution in Clash Royale. Starting off with the Evo archers. These things are extremely good at glass cannons, but that being the glass part of it, they will die extremely easily to things like arrows, to things like wizards, any splash unit, any support unit. You have to make sure when you're playing these cards, you're playing them with intent. You're playing the Evo archers to snipe a building, snipe a flying machine, snipe something. Usually it's played in things like X-Bow, so you can snipe a building, snipe a counter to the X-Bow, and the opponent's caught off guard. You should make sure you're trying to force out your opponent's answers before you play those cards, so you don't just play the Evo and it instantly gets spelled. Usually you pair it with other bait cards, or you outcycle your opponent. You don't typically throw these cards in a pretty heavy deck. Evo Musketeer is extremely simple to use. You line it up and you snipe something. Similar to the archers, but less of a glass cannon, which is why the Musketeer is pretty much better than the archers. She's going to be used to get really cool TikTok clips, or mostly paired with things like balloon cycle, so that she can snipe opponents, baby dragons, eye dragons, e-dragons, anything you want, basically even buildings. Like, think about placing a balloon down. You know your opponent's going to place a building, so you place the Musketeer Evo directly in the middle, snipe a building, take it out. That's what she's used for, and she can also be used, I mean, I guess what I wouldn't do with her is hold her for too long, because a lot of cycle decks that use Musketeer want to cycle Musketeers, and if you just sit there waiting for the right opportunity to Evo Musk, you're really hurting your defense. So don't hold on to her too long, but make sure you're playing her with purpose, just like the archers. Diddy Cage. It is very, very difficult to mess up playing the Diddy Cage. You usually, the biggest thing I'd say when you're playing Diddy is you want to, okay, you're playing the Evo Cage, you want to make sure that you're not just letting your opponent get free spell value or relying on it too heavily. What I mean is the Goblin Cage will do an extremely good job at dealing with Ram Riders, Battle Rams, Pekkas, Princes. Use it to that advantage. Like, you could play it right up next to a card just to pull it in. Don't use it like the normal cage, and be aware of your opponent's spells, because it will just die instantly to lightning. It'll die if the cage gets hit by anything. You want to make sure you can protect it if you can, or just play it out of the range of something. Don't play it too high at the bridge so it can get sniped. You want to make sure that your cage is protected, and that your cage is being played when your opponent is hopefully dealing with one of your pressure pushes in the other lane, so that you can't focus down on your cage. Because if I'm an E-Giant player, for example, I know you have a cage down, I'm going to lightning that cage at all costs. So you need to pressure me to make sure I can't lightning that cage, or something along those lines. Evo Skellies are really, really nice if you can time them properly. A lot of the time you like play them on Evo Royal recruits and they instantly die to something. Usually, if you can, play the card like right next to something else, since they're typically played in cycle decks. Let's say you have a knight and you play your knight on 3 recruits or 4 recruits. They're distracted by the knight, then you place the skeletons on top, and then they attack. You need to make sure the skeletons actually attack and be unpredictable with them, because if it's obvious you have Evo Skellies and your opponent takes obvious value, you're like, oh, duh, you're going to go Evo Skellies here. They're probably going to get ready to pre-spell it or predict it or play something into it to be unpredictable, and make sure that you're not like leaving it up to chance. You want to make sure, try and bait if you can, but the Evo Skellies being only 1 elixir, it's not like their job to always get value. Try and be unpredictable with them. Try and make sure they're going to attack. They have like really limited range, and you know, a lot of the time they don't actually do something. So maybe pair them with a stun, pair them with the snowball, a log, a knockback, so they can get that attack off, because if they don't attack, they're useless. Evo Bomber is really, really fun. He actually does a tremendous job at sniping towers, but also on the offensive end, he could be used to snipe counters. So let's say you have a bunch of things grouped up together, sort of like the magic archer. You can line them up and get a bunch of damage. However, he can't attack the same thing twice with a bomb, which makes him a little bit inadequate. But the bomber is typically used when you line him up with things. You can line him up at the bridge. If a card is about like 4 to 5 tiles deep, you can line it up on the tower directly and get damage. So make sure, again, you try and be unpredictable with the bombers, but if your opponent just gives you really good bomber value, you can set up your plays to make sure something's in front of the tower so that the bomber chips away from it on your side of the arena. Evo Valk, one of the best defensive cards in the game, and honestly great on offense too. That's a big tip, is use her on offense so she can actually, you know, make sure she pulls in things. Let's say your opponent's musketeer cycling, you only have enough spells to deal with one. The musketeer can, you know, die to the Evo Valk if she pulls it in. But yeah, the Valkyrie is something that you want to make sure is not instantly being attacked by things. You play your Evo Valk in the middle of a mini Pekka and a Goblin machine and God knows what, she's going to instantly die and get no value. So just like the skeletons in a way, try and make sure that she's surviving initially until she gets that first NATO off, because she will be able to get really good value unless she's being DPS down. Try and protect her from high DPS cards with whatever you have in your deck, skellies, goblins, guards, whatever it may be, and don't be scared to play the Valkyrie on offense either. She's a staple. Her NATO does great damage, and she can be used to also be careful about ice spirits if you're using her on hogs, rams, anything like that. A lot of cycle players love to ice spirit, so make sure you're a bit careful about that because it will mess up your NATO pull. Evo barbs are simple. They survive fireball, so you don't really need to worry about getting fireballed. You just play the card. You just play the card on things. They kind of, it's, I think, one of the only Evos you could just play on something and it just works. But yeah, the Evo barbs are really great because of their rage spell. They just do more damage, have more health, do everything better. You don't really need any extra advice. You just play them exactly like normal barbs and they do the trick just wonderfully. Evo Cannon is amazing, but with Evo Cannon, it's easy to get little to no value out of it. When you're playing your Evo Cannons, try and play them with purpose. Try and make sure that you are timing it right to snipe things at the bridge, because a lot of the time you can catch people going minions, princess, dark goblin, firecracker, whatever it may be in the range of the Evo cannon and instantly having it die. So try and make sure every time you're playing your cannon that it is timed correctly so that you can snipe things at the bridge, because it is easy to miss them. And also, if you do know your opponent has something like a goblin gang or a skeleton army, you can play this thing really high up and actually snipe that, but only if you're absolutely sure that that's what they're going to play. Evo Battle Ram is great, but you always want to make sure that it's tanked for, because the Evo Battle Ram, if it takes too much damage, is just not worth it. It takes forever to get to your Evo Battle Ram because Battle Ram's not really a card that you can just cycle and get away with. The Battle Ram Evo is at its best when there is a tank in front of it, whether it's something simple like an Ice Golem or whether you're trying to build a Pekka push with it. A lot of people try and bypass this by going Speedy Baby Dragon with it, and it makes it really intimidating, but you have to take advantage of the fact that it will run through units, knock them back, and it can't be stopped well by buildings. So if you make sure it is always being tanked for whenever you can, and you don't just play it at the bridge, because if it dies, it won't, if it takes damage, it won't use its knockback well enough. If it's only taking damage from like one thing, it will do a great job at knocking them back and still getting damage on the tower. And plus you have the Evo barbs in there. Always make sure it's protect. Wizard is amazing, and honestly the biggest tip I'd give for the wizard, make sure that he is getting advantage of the shield. You can put this thing in the middle of a push and use it to knock back everything, and it's literally insane. I love doing that with the Evo wizard, but you always want to make sure that your wizard's getting value out of his shield, because it's not hard to do that at all. And you can also really annoy your opponents by trying to figure out, well, first of all, you should be doing this anyways, but figuring out what spells they have in their deck. So when you're taking advantage of that spell combo, you can also simultaneously use your other cards, knowing that, hey, my opponent has to log poison this wizard. Now if he has to do that, it's an overcommitment, and he doesn't have those spells to apply opposite lane pressure with, or to defend your opposite lane pressure with. Use so many opportunities to use the shield and to get your opponent's spell value out and be unpredictable with it. Evo bats are a little bit underwhelming, and I won't lie, but they can get so much value when you use them properly. Let's say your opponent has a snowball for your bats, and it usually kills bats. But if you're smart with it and you're applying pressure the moment that because let's say your opponent's a genius and they know you have Evo bats in hand, if you apply pressure and force them to take their eye off the bats for 1 second, they will heal and no longer die to small spells. This applies to pretty much every spell except arrows, and the bats are really, really annoying if they can't be spelled, because bats are always paired with, or usually always paired with, other spell bait cards, so that if your opponent does have to waste a spell, now they can't actually kill the bats and they can't kill the rest of your bait cards. So always be keeping an eye on your opponent's spell that they have for the bats, and make sure you're not being predictable with them so you don't get predicted, because then they won't do anything. But don't be afraid to also apply pressure with them, because they are really annoying when you pair them with something like a miner, and now the things that we usually kill bats just have no chance. Evo Mortar is great, but the problem with the Evo Mortar is the same problem with the normal Mortar. Getting a lock is difficult. Now with the Evo Mortar, if you make sure that you are just pretty much timing the Evo Mortar as well as you can. So making sure, hey, this is what my opponent has to distract the Mortar. This is what my opponent can play directly at the bridge to counter my Mortar. And setting up the rest of your deck so that you know what they're going to play, or at least what they, because let's say they have a Royal Giant. Obviously, you want to make sure you're timing your push very correctly so that they can't just Royal Giant directly into the Mortar, or if they do, you're ready for it and you're able to either use the Evo Mortar as a distraction or get the Mortar to lock on. The Mortar does have a very strong advantage when paired with the Miner, because you can tank, or anything, I guess, like the Knight as well, because you can tank for the Evo Goblins, or you can tank for the Evo Mortar's Goblins. Don't mindlessly play the Mortar at the bridge. Time it correctly, because when timed properly and when you're applying pressure in the opposite lane or making your opponent deal with two things simultaneously, they won't be able to commit as much to the Mortar, and that is when it will shine, not when the opponent's at like 8 to 10 elixir. Evo Zap, really easy to play. You can use this pretty much. It's honestly really hard to mess up Evo Zap. It's really good because it's able to kill things like Firecrackers, Dark Goblins, minions, minion hordes, paired with Fireball, which is a really good combo with it. You're able to kill things like Queens, like E-Drags, and honestly, the Evo Zap is always a good idea to use. You can use it on offense, on defense. It just depends on the game. There's not really a set way to use it, but it's always going to get really good value. So while there's no like real insane tip to use with the Evo Zap, take advantage of the stun as well. You'd be surprised how many extra connections you can get if you let this fly. The Pekka is simple. She kills something, she heals off something. So you want to make sure, but because the healing scales, you want to make sure you're trying to use her healing on, although you can't control it exactly, thicker units. Because when she is able to heal off those thick units, she heals way more HP than when she heals with something else. So if you can, try and set things up to be killed by the Pekka when you can, so that she actually heals. And don't be afraid to just set up massive counter pushes with the Pekka, and making sure that maybe if the time is right, you don't commit full lane to the Pekka, you split up your pushes, because what typically counters the Pekka normally won't counter the Pekka Evo due to her heal sometimes. So you can set this up and play to your advantage, as long as you still have a small spell or whatever it may be for their small units to counter the Pekka. Once you get into the medium units, that's when the Pekka shines and won't be countered as easily or as normally as before. So try and split up your pushes. Don't always force yourself to push with the Pekka. If you push in the opposite lane, you might be able to have more success, because the Pekka is going to heal and still force out responses. The Evo Witch is at her most annoying when your opponent isn't able to commit their full normal counter to her. Now, usually, I mean, because you know what's kind of crazy? If you get like 2 sets of skeletons healed or just on the board, the Valkyrie won't kill her. Like, the Valkyrie will lose a 1v1 against the Witch. So take an important note of what your opponent's Witch counters are. Use that to your advantage, because the Evo Witch is going to heal. If you just play your Witch normally and just, you know, don't support her at all, she's just gonna die and she's gonna be pretty easy to kill. But if you've got her behind a push and you've just making it really hard to deal with your Witch, play her deep, don't let her get sniped. You know, when you're at the bridge, make sure you're always putting her with tanks, use slowdowns, use whatever, just be annoying, keep her alive, because the longer she's alive, the harder it's going to be to deal with, and the more of a chance your opponent's going to make a misplay, because they're going to have to commit so much elixir to the Witch. Just keep her alive. It doesn't matter exactly how much value she's getting, and you could do this against any deck that doesn't have a lightning in it. Just keep her alive, and be careful about things like Valkyrie or Mega Knight at the bridge, and make sure they can't just instantly play things at the bridge. Play the Witches deep, like I said, and just try and protect her. Evo Goblin Barrel is dominant and at its best when you're timing it correctly with 2 pushes. It doesn't have to be that deep. It can literally be, you have a Valkyrie on a counter push, you Ice Spirit the other lane, and you Evo Barrel with the Ice Spirit. That alone is a 4 elixir push on top of your just counter push that is going to just My opponent doesn't know what they're doing anymore. And this can work with any dual lane counter push. So always make sure that your Evo barrel is being tanked for in both lanes. Don't just throw it, because the Evo barrel normal decoy goblins aren't going to do anything. It's not worth playing. And you should always try and save your goblin barrel for an opportunity where you know your opponent doesn't have a good answer for one of the barrels. If your opponent has E-Spirit Log in hand, why are you going with an Evo barrel? What are we doing? You make sure you force one of those things out, and always keep an eye on what your opponents have for the barrel, so that you're not just mindlessly playing cards down, you're playing cards with a purpose. Evo Royal Giant has insane knockback, and you want to use this to your advantage. Make sure when you're playing the Royal Giants, you play them in the back if you're going up against a guy with a lot of cycle cards or buildings, and if you can't break through with the RG, you always go with it in the back. But the Evo RG's knockback is the biggest thing that helps him. So when you're using the Evo RG, pair him with like a fisherman to get high DPS troops off of him, and now anything other than a building is going to have a very difficult time dealing with the RG. Skeleton armies, goblin gangs instantly die. Guards are not going to be as good. The knight, the falc, any melee unit's going to be really bad against the Royal Giant. So you want to either Royal Giant the back or pair the Royal Giant with the fisherman to make sure that your Royal Giant is getting a favorable unit on him. You don't want a mini Pekka on him or something like that. And if you can, always try and be smart with your Royal Giants and don't just play them mindlessly. Try and keep an eye on your opponent's DPS card that's really good against the Royal Giant to either force it out or have a prediction fisherman or something ready for that card so your Royal Giant doesn't get slaughtered before he can attack. I'm not going to give you advice on Royal recruits. Play the freaking card. Evo Ice Spirit. The biggest thing I'd say, because the Ice Spirit always gets value, is try and get it on something in the middle of a push, and also make sure it stays alive. That seems like such a dumb thing to do, but like Evo Ice Spirit needs to actually be alive to actually jump, and it only needs 1 second. You just need to make sure when you're placing the Ice Spirit, you're not placing it into something that will directly kill it. Distract, or make sure that you're timing your Ice Spirit properly so that the Ice Spirit actually gets off, because if it doesn't, it's not going to do anything. And it's very easy to mess up the Ice Spirit because you think, oh, it's just going to bail me out, and then it dies before it jumps because you didn't place it properly. The placement is the biggest thing with the Ice Spirit Evo, and that is how you will win games with it. Evo Giant Snowball. I mean, the thing is, this card is really annoying with cards like Drill. You just want to know what you're trying to Evo Snowball. Every time you play an Evo Snowball, obviously on defense, it's easy to use as a bailout. There's no instructions needed there. The Evo Snowball, you need to have a purpose when you're playing it. I'm playing this Evo Snowball to pull the guards off my drill. Pull the Valkyrie off my drill. I am not Evo Snowball. I hope he plays something. I hope he plays something. Play it with purpose. Don't waste it. Play it with purpose every single time you're playing it. Play it to do something, because that way you're going to formulate your strategy better. You know what he's going to do or what you're planning on doing with it, and you won't make a misplay with the Evo Snowball. Obviously, don't be afraid to use it on defense either. It's better on defense most of the time than it is on offense, and maybe that's another tip too. Don't always force yourself to use it on offense. It's a biggest defensive bailout in the game. Use it on defense. Skeleton Barrel Evo is great, but once again, the power of the Skeleton Barrel Evo comes when it is not instantly being shot at. If you can, protect it with something. It doesn't matter if it's only 3 hits you're tanking for the Skeleton Barrel. Make sure, if you can, you're protecting it from with literally anything. It can be spear goblins, it can be an ice spirit, it can be a miner, because the impact damage, a lot of the time your opponents will have answers for the skellies. That's just how it goes, even if you play a bait deck. But the impact damage is what's really gonna just cause pain to your opponent, because this thing will do 500 to 700 impact damage if you can get both of them on, and even 300 if you can get one of them on. So always try and keep the Skeleton Barrel, if you can, alive just from something. It doesn't have to be full health, but it gets way more annoying if you can tank for it for just even a split second. The Dark Goblin Evo is great if he can be kept alive. Now, he dies to log, so that's not saying much, and it's not easy to do. But the best thing you can do with the Evo Dark Goblin is make sure you're always keeping an eye on your opponent's spells to instantly counter him, and either using bait cards to get that spells out of him, or outcycling those spells, which is very doable, especially with fast cycle bait decks. You're going to play the Dark Goblin knowing, like, you're playing your second Dark Goblin of the game, because it's 2 cycles. You play your second Dark Goblin of the game with the intent to get the spell out so they don't have something for the Evo Dark Goblin. or you're playing your, other cards, let's say a princess or something, to get them, or just maybe even giving them better than normal arrows or log values, so that now your Dark Goblin can deal with something. Because if he doesn't die immediately, he will get insane value, especially on tanks. Gob Giant, I'm not helping you. I'm dead ass just not. Okay, maybe a little bit. With the Gob Giant Evo, the biggest thing you can do, pair him with Rage, because Rage will speed up the speed of the Goblins, and if you can, try and use the Goblin Giant with high DPS cards and things like Rage, Vines, Zap, just to stun for a second. Take advantage of the fact that the Spear Goblins on the back will actually chip away at things. But the biggest step, I mean, it's not hard to play. Just pair it with Rage. You will get extra bonus value out of him, because not only will the Spear Goblins attack faster, but he'll also spawn faster and hit faster. So he's really good with the Rage. Evo Tesla is amazing, and you always want to use it pretty much just like a swarm counter to counter things, but also don't just use it as a bailout. Use it to be annoying as heck. You can use this thing on offense and literally keep it at the bridge, and you will be stunning things. You can be aggressive with it, typically played with Expo Cycle, things like that. But yeah, you could be aggressive with the Evo Tesla. Don't be afraid to just use this thing as a bailout. And also, maybe even consider using one of your, let's say you're playing against bait or something, and you need to save the log for the barrel every time. You can use your log on offense. Use that log on offense and use the Evo Tesla to bail you out. That's a really good idea, and the Evo Tesla, great on offense, sitting at the bridge, popping up. Also, be careful where you play it. Play it with intent. Don't just play it randomly. Or you can say that with every freaking card in the game, but when you play your Teslas with intent to do something, that can be a great decision as well. The Evo Furnace, when you're playing this card, it's not hard to get crazy value out of it, but make sure, just like the Dark Goblin, it's a glass cannon. You want to make sure that you're trying to keep it alive, and you're not just sacrificing it to the wolves because it's gonna spawn some fire spirits. At the same time, you can't play this card all the way in the back and just let your opponent spell it. You want to have a nice fine line between your card not being too high to just get sniped instantly, not being too low to get no fire spirit value. Either try and protect it immediately, or if your opponent spells it, they spell it, but use the fire spirit hot boost to your advantage. While the thing's attacking something, it will spawn more fire spirits and be annoying as hell. Don't play directly into your opponent's counter to it, and also don't be afraid to use this thing extremely aggressively to get the value out of the fire spirits, because there's no point to using it just like a normal furnace. Evo Hunter is amazing because he is always going to be able to just completely stop things dead in their tracks. When you're using the Evo Hunter, want to get him up close and personal. Use him on offense all the time to stun things. When you know what your opponent's going to use, say you're pairing it with an RG, you know your opponent's going to eye drag, get that Evo Hunter ready and make sure you're using him on offense aggressively. Evo Hunter defensively is amazing too. You always need to make sure you're placing him closest to the thing you're trying to net, because he will net the thing closest to him, and you don't want him to, like, let's say you have a half a goblin gang and a prince coming at you, you don't place him properly, he nets the goblin, the prince charges, you're dead. You need to make sure that you're always trying to be very careful with where you place this card, and make sure to place him up and close and personal. There's no point to placing him 4 tiles away from cards so that he deals damage with 4 of his pellets. That's not a good idea. Make sure he's up close, tight, snug, and personal. Evo Eye Drag is a card that will get insane amounts of value if you're keeping track of what your opponent has for it. It's different every game, but you need to keep that stun unit in check. Or if your opponent has no stuns units, but they have like a musketeer or something, protect it. Just keep it alive and don't play it like you normally would and just be comfortable with letting it die. Be very, very choosy and picky about when you play your Evo Eye Drag, so that you can make sure it is not getting instantly stunned or damaged at all. Play it to get it to ramp up on something, and once it's ramped up, use that thing aggressively. Take advantage of it. It doesn't matter if you're backing it up in the same lane, or you're backing it up or by pushing in another lane and having them have to respond to that eye drag. Use the fact that the eye drag is just going to annihilate things to your advantage, because when it's fully charged up, you know your opponent's going to have to only play 1, 2, 3 cards at max. They only have this many cards to deal with the Evo Drag. Use that to your advantage with the rest of your deck, either to protect him, and because you know those units are coming, or to apply pressure since you know those units will come out. Mega Knight! It's very not difficult to use this card at all, but my number one tip for the Evo Mega Knight is when you have him, save him for dealing with your opponent's win condition, because a lot of the time, the Evo Mega Knight will completely stall out your opponent's win condition, regardless of what it is, except if it's like a lava hound. It will stall out any single win condition in the entire game, and the Mega Knight is not useful if you're just mindlessly playing it and it's jumping around and you're like, hey, I'm gonna place my Evo Mega Knight down, I hope he does something on offense. Save him for defense. It doesn't matter if you have to sit on him all game. If your opponent knows you have that Evo Mega Knight, they can't push in, and if they do, you will be able to counter push and win the game instantly. So make sure you're holding on to this card for the, and maybe it doesn't, maybe your opponent gives you amazing value, then obviously you know, use it. Don't be afraid to use it, but try and save it if you can for the win conditions, because it'll get so much value. Firecracker is another card that is useless if it just gets spelled immediately and your opponents know it's coming. You want to use the exact same tips from the Dart Goblin or from the Archers, where you're playing this thing with immediate impact. Like you're playing this thing at the bridge to snipe something. Again, my second Firecracker of the game. I play it, my opponent arrows it. Okay, now they need to play 4 more cards to get back to arrows. So you race them to get back to that arrows, and you can get back to your Firecracker before they're back to arrows. Or make sure you're trying to bait out the arrows with something else. Don't be too predictable with this, again, because a lot of the times the people, if they know you have Firecracker and they give you Firecracker value, will oftentimes try and predict that. So maybe be careful, wait out a little bit. If you know your Firecracker is really predictable, just hold on to it for a second, see if they play something, and then if they do end up playing that thing and it's an overcommitment because you didn't play the Firecracker, you're in a good spot. Evo Wall Breakers, do not be afraid to use these things on defense. They kind of somehow actually do really good value on defense because even with the upcoming nerf, they are still going to be decent on defense. You can use them as a mini delivery, and also they are going to not be able to be countered by the normal things that would counter them. So when you're playing your Evo Wall Breakers, you're always thinking to yourself, what is my opponent going to use to counter these? What do they have in hand to counter them? And just as the game goes on, what is his best option to these? So always be thinking of that and trying to force out those options, because for only 2 elixir, you're going to be able to open up so many areas, because if you have to play the Evo Wall Breakers and your opponent has to commit a certain series of troops, since you know they're playing those, you could apply opposite lane pressure to deal, take advantage of that, or you can use those pressures to open up lanes for your wall breakers. Be really aggressive when you have those Evo Wall Breakers in cycle, because for only 2 elixir, if you catch your opponent lacking, they are going to get massive damage. Evo E-Drag is amazing, and you want to make sure that you're playing this card not where it's immediately going to die, but always trying to get value with 2 things close together. The E-Drag's biggest advantage is multiple units close to each other. The chain will dominate, especially 2 specific units right next to each other, but even if it's 3, 4, 5, 6 or more, you're going to see the Electro Dragon get tons of value, but it is going to only get that value when 2 things are next to each other. Be careful when you're using the Evo E-Drag not to just waste it on 1 unit, or pair it with NATO is the best option, I'd say. Never play your E-Drag without a NATO, because with NATO, you can dump everything together and then take advantage of the fact that the stun is just going to go around like 10 times, demolish everything. Pair it with NATO always, and make sure you're trying to get multiple units grouped up, or don't use it. Evo Xe, dominant, dude. The Evo Xe is just dominant. This card is insane, and take advantage of the fact that he will knock back things. Play him up close and personal, just like the Hunter, to get him to knock back those things. Always pair him with, you don't always have to pair him with NATO, but consider pairing him with NATO if your deck can fit it in the deck. And Executioner, always get up close and personal with him. Make sure you are taking careful aim of where you're placing him, because you want to make sure you can get the best angles possible. But don't be afraid to use this thing as a win condition counter, or to get aggressive on offense with him. When you're using him, always counter push with him, and always think to yourself, when you're counter pushing with your Executioner, what do they have to deal with this? What are they going to play here? And that can dictate how you can play around the executioner. You're going to take advantage of that knockback and always counter push with him, since it's really annoying for opponents to play something at the bridge to counter your XC when it's on a counter push, because it's going to knock it back and they can really mess up certain interactions. Here's my best advice for the Evo drill. Don't play it. Just don't play it. With the Evo Lumberjack, the biggest advice to give is to realize that he's going to stay alive if he's in his rage. And that can last up to, like, what is it, 4 or 5 seconds? So you can get a ton of extra bonus value when he's in that rage. So apply opposite lane pressure with him, because you know it forces out additional responses, or play him with purpose to try and get somewhere with the push. Let's say you're playing with a Pekka bridge spam deck and you play your Evo Lumberjack down. Try and get him deep. Like, try and get him deep inside the area, and make sure that you're not playing your Evo Lumberjack until you have gotten rid of the kiteable units or something that's going to distract him and get tons of value off of him. You don't want to play him into a tank, really, unless you're defending it on offense, I mean. And you want to make sure the Evo Lumberjack is always trying to get him to stay in that rage. Don't let your opponents pull it out. Always make sure that when you're opposite lane pressuring, you're doing it just to get elixir out of your opponent and force out the actual push to get damage. You know what I'm saying? If he doesn't stay in his rage, he's instantly useless. You want to make sure he stays in his rage. Next up is the knight. When you're thinking about the knight, yes, I changed my shirt. It might be the next day, actually, because I forgot to include the knight. The knight is really strong when you're using him not just as a normal knight, but when you're using him on purpose to distract air cards, which is his specialty. Things like X-bows, just distracting any ranged units, air cards or ranged units specifically. So you want to try and use him purposefully for that exact reason. You want to use him to distract air troops or to distract ranged units, and not have him directly attacking something, because obviously they can play something on your knight, right? But you don't want to play your knight into another melee unit if you can avoid it, because that just defeats the whole purpose of the Evo. The fun thing is, knight can be used as a mini tank in front of, or a mini win condition in front of literally anything you play in any deck. So you can work with knight loon, you can work with knight hog, literally anything is good to tank, because of course he's taking away that damage from the tower, but also how I mentioned it in the beginning. Now with baby dragon, you usually don't necessarily use the baby dragon with the other troops. You're using the other troops with the baby dragon. Of course, you always want to take advantage of getting a baby dragon down on your opponent's pushes to get that slow field going, because it will benefit you so much. It's like having basically an ice wizard just dealing the whole area of slow and not just the one little concentrated push. But the baby dragon is something you always want to play with the intent, if you can, to counter push with it. Now, the baby dragon can be used in literally any deck, even when it moves to 2 cycles. You want to be ready to apply pressure with even something as simple as guards. You can use guards, you can use mighty miner, you can use whatever you use, royal hogs. You just want to counter push with the baby dragon whenever you can, and not just waste it randomly. Use it to... You can use it and get away with just defending, but always try and counter push with it and make sure you're getting that speed for the rest of your troops.